You don't need to do anything. Just listen and let go.
Arjuna's chariot stood still between the two armies. His fingers trembled around the bowstring. The weight of his cousins and teachers lined up across the battlefield, pressed against his chest. He turned to Krishna, his voice cracking. I won't fight them. Krishna didn't move. His hands rested on the reins, loose but ready. He watched Arjuna's face without blinking. This isn't the time for hesitation. The dust from the waiting soldiers hung in the air. Arjuna's shoulders slumped. Their family. My teacher is out there. How can I raise my weapon? Krishna exhaled through his nose. He shifted his weight slightly, making the chariot creak. You're seeing only bodies, not the eternal. Arjuna shook his head. His knuckles whitened around his bow. Explain it to me, because right now I see no victory worth this cost. Krishna tilted his chin up. His fingers tapped once against the reins. The body is temporary. The soul is not. You grieve for what cannot be killed. Arjuna's breath came unevenly. He looked down at his own hands. Then why fight at all? Krishna turned fully toward him now. His voice stayed steady. Because duty remains. The right action matters more than the outcome. Arjuna swallowed hard. He stared at the lines of soldiers ahead. Even if it breaks me. Krishna leaned forward slightly. His voice lowered. You're already broken. That's why you hesitate. Arjuna's grip on the bow loosened. His shoulders dropped another inch. What if I can't do it? Krishna didn't answer right away. He watched a hawk circling above them. You won't know until you try. Arjuna wiped his palms on his thighs. He kept his eyes on the ground. And if I refuse? Krishna leaned back. He folded his hands in his lap. Then you'll live with that choice. Arjuna's jaw tightened. He looked up at the sky for a moment. You make it sound simple. Krishna shook his head. It isn't simple, but it is clear. Arjuna let out a slow breath. His fingers tapped against the bow grip. Clear isn't the same as easy. Krishna lifted one shoulder slightly. Easy doesn't matter. Only truth does. Arjuna looked down at the chariot floor. The wood was worn smooth from use. What if I don't believe in your truth? Krishna turned his head to watch the horizon. That changes nothing. The truth remains. Arjuna's fingers twitched against the bowstring. You're asking me to kill people I love. Krishna didn't look at him. I'm asking you to see beyond them. Arjuna's breath hitched. He closed his eyes for a second. I can't. Krishna turned to face him fully. You can. You just don't want to. Arjuna's grip tightened on the bow again. His fingers shook. What if I'm wrong? Krishna didn't blink. Then you'll learn. Arjuna opened his mouth, then shut it. His shoulders rose and fell. I don't know how. Krishna kept watching him. His fingers stayed still on the reins. You know more than you think. Arjuna rubbed his forehead. He didn't look at Krishna. What if I fail? Krishna tilted his head slightly. You already have, and yet here you are. Arjuna's breath came out slow. His fingers uncurled from the bow grip. So what now? Krishna leaned forward slightly. His knees pressed against the chariot floor. Now you choose. Arjuna rubbed his thumb along the bowstring. The vibration hummed against his skin. I don't know how to choose. Krishna didn't move. His hands stayed open on his thighs. Knowing comes after choosing, not before. Arjuna's fingers stopped moving on the bowstring. He looked at Krishna sideways. That makes no sense. Krishna exhaled slowly. His shoulders relaxed. You'll understand when you do it. Arjuna pressed his lips together. His knee bounced once. What if I choose wrong? Krishna turned his head toward the distant army lines. Then you'll know why it was wrong. Arjuna's fingers flexed against the bow grip. His palm felt damp. That's not helpful. Krishna shrugged without looking at him. Help isn't what you need right now. Arjuna dug his thumb into the wood grain of the chariot rail. What should I need then? Krishna finally turned back to him. His expression didn't change. Courage to face what comes next. Arjuna let out a sharp breath through his nose. His fingers curled into loose fists. I don't feel very courageous. Krishna leaned forward, just enough to catch Arjuna's downcast eyes. Fear doesn't mean you lack courage. Arjuna wiped his palms on his thighs again. His shoulders hunched forward. Then, what does it mean? Krishna shifted his weight, making the chariot tilt slightly. It means you're human. Arjuna's fingers twitched against his knees. He kept his gaze fixed on the bow lying across his lap. That doesn't make this easier. Krishna let out a slow breath. His fingers curled slightly around the reins without pulling them. It shouldn't be easy. Arjuna's jaw worked silently for a moment. He rubbed his thumb along the bow's grip again. I don't know what to do. Krishna shifted his weight slightly. The chariot swayed with the movement. You do. You just don't like doing it. Arjuna swallowed hard. His fingers stilled against the bow. What if I regret it? Krishna's gaze didn't waver. Regret comes from not trying, not from trying wrong. Arjuna's fingers dug into the wood grain again. His breathing sounded uneven. I've never been afraid like this before. Krishna adjusted his position slightly. The reins shifted in his lap. Fear isn't your enemy. Denying it is. Arjuna exhaled sharply through his nose. His shoulders tensed. I can't think straight. Krishna adjusted his seat slightly. The leather straps of the chariot groaned under his weight. Thinking won't help now. Arjuna pressed his palms flat against his thighs. His fingers twitched. What will? Krishna turned his head just enough to watch the armies shifting in the distance. Action will. Arjuna's breath hitched. His hands clenched into fists again. Even if it feels wrong. Krishna didn't look away from the horizon. Especially then. Arjuna's fingers flexed against his palms. His breath came out ragged. That doesn't sound right. Krishna leaned back slightly. The wood beneath him creaked. Right isn't the point. Doing is. Arjuna wiped his sleeve across his forehead. His voice dropped. I need more time. Krishna shook his head once. Time won't change what you see. Arjuna's shoulders hunched forward. His fingers pressed into his knees. Then what will? Krishna turned his head just enough to meet Arjuna's eyes. Looking deeper, Arjuna swallowed hard. His throat clicked. I don't know how. Krishna exhaled slowly. His fingers loosened on the reins. Start by letting go. Arjuna's grip on his thighs tightened. His knuckles whitened. I don't think I can. Krishna tilted his chin up slightly. His voice softened. Try anyway. Arjuna's breath shuddered. His eyelids fluttered shut. It hurts too much. Krishna didn't move. His shoulders stayed relaxed. Pain isn't the enemy. Arjuna's jaw worked silently. His head bowed slightly. Then what is? Krishna shifted his weight. The chariot swayed gently. Believing it shouldn't hurt, Arjuna let out a slow breath. His fingers uncurled slightly. That makes no sense. Krishna's mouth quirked at one corner. It will. Arjuna rubbed his thumb along his palm. His voice dropped to a whisper. When? Krishna turned fully toward him. His eyes didn't blink. When you're ready. Arjuna's shoulders slumped. His head dipped forward. I don't feel ready. Krishna reached out and placed one hand on Arjuna's shoulder. His fingers didn't press hard. You don't have to. Arjuna's breath hitched. His shoulders tensed under Krishna's touch. Then how? Krishna's hand stayed steady. His voice didn't rise. By moving anyway. Arjuna swallowed. His throat clicked again. I don't know if I can. Krishna's fingers flexed slightly. His thumb brushed Arjuna's collarbone. You can. Arjuna's eyes squeezed shut. A tear trailed down his cheek. It's too much. Krishna didn't pull away. His voice stayed low. Only at first. Arjuna's breath came out shaky. His fingers trembled against his legs. What if I fall? Krishna's grip firmed slightly. His palm stayed warm against Arjuna's shoulder. I won't let you. Arjuna's head lifted slightly. His eyes opened. They looked red around the edges. Promise. Krishna didn't hesitate. His chin dipped once. Always. Arjuna's shoulders relaxed by degrees. His breathing slowed. Okay. Krishna's hand didn't move. His fingers stayed curled lightly against Arjuna's armor. Okay. Arjuna swallowed hard. His throat worked. Where do I start? Krishna tilted his head toward the bow lying across Arjuna's lap. His voice didn't change. Where you are. Arjuna's fingers flexed against the wood grip. His breath evened out slightly. Just like this. Krishna nodded once. His hand didn't lift from Arjuna's shoulder. Exactly like this. Arjuna's jaw tightened. His fingers curled around the bow. No preparation. Krishna exhaled softly. His thumb tapped once against Arjuna's collarbone. You've prepared enough. Arjuna's shoulders squared slightly. His grip on the bow firmed. You're sure? Krishna didn't blink. His voice didn't waver. Certain. Arjuna inhaled deeply. His chest expanded. His fingers adjusted their hold on the bow. Okay. Krishna's hand lifted slowly from Arjuna's shoulder. His fingers didn't linger. Good. Arjuna's breath came out steady this time. His shoulders didn't slump. Now what? Krishna turned his head toward the battlefield ahead. His voice stayed calm. Now you see. Arjuna followed his gaze. His fingers didn't tremble on the bow this time. See what? Krishna didn't look away from the horizon. His hands rested lightly on his knees. What's really there? Arjuna's eyes narrowed slightly. His head tilted as he stared across the field. The soldiers blurred together into shapes without faces. I see men waiting to die, he said. Krishna's fingers tapped once against his knee. Look past their armor, he said, past their weapons. Arjuna's breathing slowed. His grip on the bow loosened further. The wood felt lighter in his hands. I see shadows, he murmured. Krishna nodded without looking at him. The reins lay still across his lap. Good, he said. Keep looking. Arjuna blinked slowly. His breath came quieter now. The shapes ahead seemed to shift slightly, their edges less defined. They're fading, he whispered. Krishna tilted his head just enough to watch Arjuna's face. No, he said. You're seeing clearer. Arjuna's fingers went slack around the bow grip. His shoulders dropped lower. It feels strange, he said. Krishna exhaled through his nose. His fingers flexed once against his thighs. Strange isn't wrong, he said. Arjuna rubbed his thumb against the bowstring, absent-mindedly. His shoulders twitched slightly. It doesn't feel right. Krishna leaned back slightly in his seat. The leather straps creaked under his movement. Right would be easier. Arjuna's fingers stilled against the bowstring. His breathing grew steadier. Easier isn't what we're doing here. Krishna shifted his weight slightly. The chariot swayed with the movement. No, it isn't. Arjuna lifted his chin. His eyes didn't waver from the shifting shapes ahead. I'm starting to see something else now. Krishna didn't reply immediately. He watched Arjuna's face for a long moment. His fingers rested motionless on his knees. Tell me what you see. Arjuna's breath hitched slightly. His fingers twitched against the bowstring. Light, he said. His voice sounded uncertain. Like dust in sunlight. Krishna nodded once. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Keep watching it. Arjuna's grip on the bow loosened further. His fingers barely touched the wood now. It's moving, he whispered, but not like people move. Krishna exhaled slowly through his nose. His chin dipped slightly. That's not people you're seeing. Arjuna's fingers lifted completely off the bow. His palms turned upward in his lap. Then, what is it? Krishna shifted his weight just enough to make the chariot creak. What's always been there? Arjuna's breathing slowed further. His shoulders dropped another inch. I don't understand. Krishna's fingers tapped once against his knee. Understanding comes later, he said. First comes seeing. Arjuna blinked rapidly. His eyes watered slightly from staring. It hurts to look. Krishna exhaled softly. His posture relaxed imperceptibly. Not for much longer, he murmured. Arjuna's hands settled palm up in his lap. The bow lay forgotten between them. I see, he whispered, but the words sounded different now. Krishna leaned forward slightly. The reins slid silently across his thighs. What do you see? Arjuna exhaled shakily. His fingertips tingled as if brushing something unseen. Threads, he murmured. Silver threads connecting everything. Krishna's lips curved just enough to disturb his stillness. His nod was barely perceptible. And where do they lead? Arjuna's breath caught. His fingers twitched as if plucking at invisible strings. His whisper was barely audible. Back to you. Krishna didn't move. His fingers stayed loose on the reins. And Arjuna blinked twice quickly. His palms lifted slightly higher. To them too. He tilted his chin toward the blurred shapes of soldiers. Krishna exhaled through his nose. The sound was almost lost in the stillness. Now follow one further. Arjuna's shoulders tensed. His fingers curled slightly inward. I can't see where they end. Krishna exhaled slowly. His fingers flexed against the reins. They don't end. Arjuna's breath hitched. His palms turned slightly downward. That can't be. Krishna didn't blink. His shoulders stayed relaxed. Look again. Arjuna's fingers trembled slightly as he reached out toward the empty air. His breath came slower now, more measured. It's all one thread, he murmured, just looping back on itself. Krishna nodded once. His fingers tapped lightly against the chariot rail. And what does that tell you? Arjuna exhaled sharply through his nose. His palm closed around nothing, then opened again. That I was never holding a bow at all. Krishna's lips curved the slightest bit. His silence stretched between them like the very threads Arjuna now saw woven through everything. Arjuna's fingers twitched once, then stilled completely. His breath came slower now, almost peaceful. The bow lay, heavy yet weightless, across his lap. You were never aiming at them either, Krishna murmured. His voice barely disturbed the stillness between chariot wheels and waiting armies. Arjuna blinked once, very slowly. When his eyes opened again, they reflected something deeper than sunlight on dust, something that made Krishna exhale in quiet satisfaction. The battlefield's noise faded to a distant hum as Arjuna's fingers curled not around the bow's grip, but around the empty space above it. His palm closed as if catching rainwater gentle, with room for what couldn't be held. Krishna watched without speaking as Arjuna's shoulders settled into a new alignment, his spine straightening not for combat, but for the simple act of breathing. The reins in Krishna's hands stayed slack, the horses shifting their weight with soft snorts. When Arjuna finally spoke, his voice carried neither hesitation nor certainty, just the quiet clarity of a man who'd glimpsed the pattern beneath the weave. Oh, he said, and the syllable hung between them, complete. Krishna didn't smile, but the lines around his eyes softened as he watched understanding settle across Arjuna's features like dawn light. The chariot creaked faintly as Arjuna shifted his weight, his fingers still hovering above the bow without touching it. Somewhere beyond them, a lone bird cried out, a sound that should have been lost in the murmur of armies, yet somehow pierced through everything. Arjuna's head turned toward it instinctively, his gaze tracking the invisible path of its flight rather than its physical form. Krishna exhaled through his nose, watching how the morning breeze lifted strands of Arjuna's hair without disturbing the stillness that had taken root in his posture. The reins lay across his lap like forgotten threads. Arjuna's fingertips brushed the air where his arrow would have knocked itself, tracing an arc that curved back toward his own chest. His lips parted, not to speak, but to breathe in the metallic scent of anticipation that no longer tasted like fear. Somewhere beyond the chariot, a single leaf detached from a distant tree, spinning lazily through the charged space between opposing forces. Krishna's eyes tracked its descent without moving his head. The silence between them deepened until it became its own kind of conversation, one that needed no translation in any language of gods or men. Arjuna's shoulders rose and fell once, decisively, as his hand finally closed around the bow's grip again. But differently, this time. Krishna watched without blinking as Arjuna lifted the weapon slowly, his fingers finding their places along the wood with deliberate precision. Yet, when he drew the string back, his elbow didn't bend quite far enough. His stance lacked the tension of impending release. The distant armies seemed to hold their collective breath as Arjuna's arrow pointed neither toward them nor away, but upward toward the exact spot where morning mist dissolved into sky. His fingers trembled, not with hesitation now, but with something more like recognition. When the arrow finally left the string, it made no sound at all, just a brief shimmer in the air where metal and intention briefly parted ways with gravity. Krishna didn't watch its flight. His eyes remained fixed on Arjuna's face as the warrior lowered his empty hands, his expression unreadable, yet profoundly changed. The arrow disappeared into the low clouds without fanfare, leaving behind only the faintest ripple in the fabric of the morning. Somewhere far beyond their sight, a single leaf shuddered where the shaft passed nearby, not struck, merely acknowledged, before continuing its lazy descent toward earth. Arjuna exhaled through his nose, his shoulders relaxing into a posture that held neither victory nor defeat, but the quiet acceptance of something too large to name. His fingers uncurled from the bow grip with deliberate gentleness, as though releasing something more than wood and string. Krishna shifted slightly in his seat, the movement causing dust to rise from the chariot floor in lazy spirals that caught the sunlight exactly where the arrow had vanished moments before. Neither man spoke as the armies ahead stirred restlessly, their weapons still raised, but no longer seeming to point in any particular direction. Arjuna's breath came slow and measured now, his fingers resting lightly on the bowstring without tension, as if it were simply another thread in the vast tapestry he'd glimpsed. The taste of metal lingered on his tongue, but it no longer burned with the bitterness of impending bloodshed. Somewhere beyond the battlefield, the fallen leaf finally touched ground with a sound too soft for human ears. Yet Krishna's lips curved in response, as if he alone had heard the whisper of its landing. The reins lay forgotten across his lap, their leather edges frayed from years of guiding chariots that no longer needed direction. Arjuna blinked once, his lashes brushing against cheeks still damp with sweat, but no longer streaked with tears. The bow in his hands felt lighter now, not because its weight had changed, but because his understanding of what it meant to hold something had shifted in ways words could never fully capture. The morning air between them hummed with an unspoken truth, too vast for any single arrow to carry. Krishna's fingers twitched against the reins, not to steer, but to feel the texture of the leather beneath his fingertips, as if relearning the shape of something he'd always known. The horses stamped their hooves softly, their tails flicking at flies that danced in the same sunlight that had moments ago swallowed Arjuna's arrow hole. Dust motes swirled between them like tiny echoes of the threads Arjuna now saw woven through everything. A single leaf, perhaps the same one, perhaps another, brushed against the chariot wheel with a soundlessness that spoke louder than any war cry. Arjuna's breath hitched, not in fear, but in recognition of something too perfect to name. His fingers, still curled loosely around the bow, trembled not with the weight of what he might destroy, but with the lightness of what he'd begun to see. Somewhere beyond the gathered armies, a bird called out, a sound that should have been lost in the murmur of waiting soldiers, but which instead seemed to stitch the moment together. Krishna exhaled softly, his shoulders relaxing in a way that suggested the battle had already been won, though no swords had been lifted. The reins slipped from his lap entirely now, pooling at his feet like discarded threads of a story no longer needing to be told. Arjuna's fingers loosened around the bow until it rested against his thigh, no longer a weapon, but simply an object, wood and string, nothing more. The tension in his jaw melted away, replaced by a quiet wonder that made him seem younger somehow, as if he were seeing the world for the first time. The battlefield ahead no longer looked like lines of enemies, but like patterns in sand, shifting with the wind, yet always remaining exactly where they belonged. A breeze carried the scent of distant rain across the field, mingling with the metallic tang of armor and the earthy musk of horses. Krishna tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something beyond hearing, perhaps the same threads Arjuna had glimpsed moments before, humming with a music only they could sense. The clouds overhead parted just enough to let a single shaft of sunlight through, illuminating the space between them like a spotlight on a stage where no performance was needed. Arjuna's lips parted, not to speak, but to breathe in the moment the taste of dawn, the weight of understanding, the lightness of release. His shoulders rose and fell with a sigh that carried years of hesitation out of his body, leaving behind only the quiet certainty of a man who had finally stopped fighting himself. The bow slipped from his fingers entirely now, landing soundlessly on the chariot floor beside Krishna's forgotten reins. Two tools laid to rest without fanfare. Their purpose served in ways neither had anticipated. Krishna's fingers flexed once, as if plucking at the air between them, and the horses shifted their weight in unison, not at any command, but as if responding to some invisible current. The dust settled around the chariot wheels in perfect rings, each particle finding its place without urgency, as though time itself had paused to witness what came next. Arjuna's hands, now empty, turned palm up in his lap, not in surrender, but in invitation, as if ready to catch whatever truth might fall from the sky like the arrow that never returned. Somewhere beyond the battlefield, a child laughed, a sound so incongruous with the moment that it should have shattered the stillness, but instead wove itself seamlessly into the tapestry of the morning. Krishna's eyes crinkled at the corners, though his mouth didn't smile, as if he alone could trace the thread connecting that distant joy to the quiet miracle unfolding between them. The sun climbed higher, warming the backs of their necks, and for the first time since dawn, the air smelled not of impending bloodshed, but of dew evaporating from grass, simple, transient, perfect. Arjuna's eyelids fluttered shut, then opened again, his gaze no longer fixed on the horizon, but on the space just beyond Krishna's shoulder, where the light bent slightly, as if around something unseen. His fingers twitched once, not reaching for anything, merely acknowledging the presence of something too vast to hold. Krishna inhaled sharply, the first sound he'd made in minutes, and the world seemed to tilt imperceptibly on its axis, realigning around this new understanding neither needed to name. The battlefield, the armies, the war itself faded into irrelevance, leaving only this: two men in a chariot, breathing the same air, bound by something deeper than duty or destiny. A single drop of sweat traced a path down Arjuna's temple, catching the sunlight as it fell, not onto the chariot floor, but onto Krishna's outstretched palm, cupped beneath it, as if to catch something far more precious than salt water. Krishna's fingers curled slowly around the droplet, his thumb brushing against Arjuna's cheekbone in a gesture too intimate to be accidental, too deliberate to be casual. Arjuna exhaled a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, had it been given shape, and the horses stamped their hooves in unison, their harness bells chiming like temple offerings in the sudden hush. Somewhere beyond them, a conch shell sounded not the brash cry of war, but the soft, sustained note of a priest calling worshippers to prayer. The sound wrapped around them both, weaving through the space between their bodies like the threads Arjuna had glimpsed earlier, binding without constricting. Krishna's other hand lifted, not to steer, not to command, but to hover just above Arjuna's heart, his fingertips barely disturbing the fabric of his tunic. The air between them thickened with something too potent to name, too pure to articulate a truth that needed no words, no arrows, no battles to prove its existence. Arjuna's breath hitched, not in fear now, but in wonder, as Krishna's palm pressed gently against his chest, not to push or pull, but simply to feel the rhythm beneath. The horses shifted their weight again, their tails flicking in perfect synchrony, as if they too could sense the shift in the universe's fabric. Dust motes danced in the sunlight between them, each particle glowing briefly before fatting back into the whole, a fleeting, beautiful reminder of what Arjuna now understood, that every ending was also a beginning, every separation merely an illusion. Krishna's lips parted not to speak, but to breathe in the moment, and the world held its breath with him. The distant armies blurred further, their weapons lowering not in surrender, but in unconscious recognition of a truth too profound for conflict. Arjuna's fingers curled lightly around Krishna's wrist, not to stop him, but to anchor himself in this new understanding that thrummed between them like the afterimage of a plucked bowstring. Somewhere overhead, the vanished arrow's shadow passed across the sun, or perhaps it was just a bird, soaring effortlessly between realms, untroubled by the boundaries that had once seemed so absolute. Krishna's thumb brushed once against Arjuna's collarbone, a silent affirmation that needed no translation. A single leaf, perhaps the same one, perhaps another, drifted down to land atop the discarded bow, its edges trembling slightly before stilling, as if it too had found its rightful place. The scent of jasmine wound through the metallic tang of armor, impossible here on the battlefield, yet undeniably present, curling around them both like an unspoken promise. Arjuna's shoulders relaxed completely now, his posture no longer that of a warrior, but of a man who had glimpsed the vastness of the tapestry and found his own thread within it. Krishna exhaled slowly, his breath warm against Arjuna's cheek, and for the first time since dawn, the air tasted not of dust and sweat, but of something inexplicably sweet, like the first sip of water after a long thirst. The conch shell's note deepened, vibrating through the chariot's wooden floorboards and into their bones, not a call to arms, but a resonance that seemed to hum in time with their heartbeats. Krishna's other hand lifted, not to gesture or command, but to hover just above Arjuna's brow, a silent blessing, or perhaps merely an acknowledgement of what had always been there. The horses' harness bells chimed softly again, their sound weaving seamlessly with the distant laughter of children and the whisper of wind through grass, a symphony too perfect to be accidental. And as the sunlight pooled around them like liquid gold, Arjuna realized, without thinking, without doubting that he had never truly been alone, not even in his deepest fear. The threads had always been there, waiting for him to see. A single petal from some unseen flower drifted between them, pale pink against the muted tones of armor and leather, and landed without sound on Krishna's shoulder. Neither moved to brush it away. Arjuna's breath steadied further still, his fingers loosening their grip on Krishna's wrist, not letting go, just easing into the certainty of contact, as if relearning the weight of another's pulse. Somewhere beyond the battlefield's edge, a stream gurgled over smooth stones, a sound so ordinary it should have been swallowed by the enormity of the moment. Yet instead it grounded them both in the quiet miracle of the present. The bow lay forgotten beside them, its string slack now, no longer taut with expectation, just wood and fiber, nothing more. The petal on Krishna's shoulder trembled as he exhaled, not a sigh, but something softer, like the release of a burden he hadn't known he was carrying. Arjuna's thumb traced absent circles against Krishna's palm, not a question, not a plea, just the unconscious motion of fingers finding comfort in warmth. Far ahead, the opposing armies shifted restlessly again, not with the tension of impending violence, but with the drowsy impatience of men standing too long in the sun, their purpose slipping like sand through fingers. And in that space between breaths, between heartbeats, the world seemed to pause, not for them, but with them, as if the universe itself had leaned in to witness this quiet recalibration of souls. Krishna's fingers curled gently around Arjuna's, not tight, just enough to feel the life thrumming beneath skin. And for a fleeting moment, the boundaries between them blurred like ink in water. The petal dislodged from Krishna's shoulder, catching an updraft to spiral lazily upward, not toward the sky, but toward Arjuna's face, brushing his cheekbone with a tenderness no human hand could replicate. The stream's murmur grew louder, or perhaps they'd just begun to truly hear it, its rhythm syncopating with their breathing, until the distinction between self and surroundings dissolved. And somewhere beyond sight, the arrow that never landed finally found its mark, not in earth or flesh, but in the space between what was and what could be. Arjuna's exhale carried the scent of crushed grass, and monsoon rain, childhood summers, and long-forgotten prayers, as Krishna's thumb traced the arc of his eyebrow with a reverence usually reserved for sacred statues. The horses snorted softly, their breath warm clouds in the cooling air, their harness bells now silent, as if out of respect for the unspoken liturgy unfolding between them. The battlefield's clamor receded further still, not vanished, just rendered irrelevant, like the distant buzzing of cicadas in high summer, ever present, but easily ignored. And the leaf on the bow trembled once more, not from wind, but from some deeper resonance, before settling into perfect stillness, as if it too had found its purpose. Dew began to bead on the chariot's carved railings, impossible at this hour, each droplet refracting the sunlight into prismatic fractals that danced across their hands, their faces, the space between. Krishna's lips moved not to speak, but to shape a silent syllable that Arjuna felt rather than heard, vibrating through his ribs like the echo of a temple gong. The stream's song shifted key minor to major as a kingfisher darted across its surface, its iridescent feathers scattering color like a handful of flung gemstones. And in that suspended moment, the taste of metal faded entirely from Arjuna's tongue, replaced by something inexplicably honeyed, not sweetness, but the memory of sweetness, lingering like the last note of a song you can't quite recall. The petals spiraled downward again, impossibly slow to land this time on the back of their joined hands, its veins pulsing faintly as if channeling some unseen current. Krishna's lashes fluttered, not in weariness, but in recognition, as the dew droplets swelled and merged, dripping to the chariot floor with a sound like distant temple bells. The kingfisher cried out, a single piercing note, and the horses' ears twitched forward in unison, their hooves stamping once before stilling completely, as if the earth itself had hushed beneath them. And Arjuna, without thought, without hesitation, turned his palms skyward beneath Krishna's, their lifelines aligning like constellations, finally slipping into place. The leaf on the abandoned bow glowed suddenly, not with fire, but with a luminance that suggested it had captured the last rays of sunset hours early, casting their profiles in gold-edged relief against the softening horizon. Krishna's exhale stirred the loose hair at Arjuna's temple, a warmth more intimate than sunlight, as the stream's murmurs resolved into something almost linguistic, syllables half heard in the spaces between water and stone. The armies beyond them sighed collectively, not in surrender, but in release, their weapons tilting earthward like saplings, bending toward some magnetic pull only they could sense. And the arrow, long vanished, whispered through the air at last, its passage marked not by sound, but by the way every bird in the field lifted its head simultaneously, as if greeting an old friend. Dew crystallized along Arjuna's brow, not from sweat now, but from the air itself, thickening with unspoken benedictions, each droplet refracting miniature visions. A laughing child, a spinning top, hands kneading dough in some sunlit courtyard far from war. Krishna's thumb stilled against his pulse point, not to count heartbeats, but to sync with them, as the kingfisher's discarded feather drifted sideways to catch in Arjuna's hair, its quill trembling like a compass needle, finding true north. The petal between their palms dissolved, not into nothingness, but into motes of light that swirled upward to join the dancing dust. And the chariot's wood groaned softly, not from weight, but from the sheer impossibility of containing what thrummed between them now. Somewhere beyond the field's edge, a clay pot shattered the sound absurdly loud in the hush, and Krishna smiled, not with his mouth, but with the crinkles at his eyes, as the shards rearranged themselves midair into a fleeting mosaic of running deer before clattering harmlessly to the dirt. Arjuna's breath hitched, not in fear this time, but in awe as the leaf's glow transferred seamlessly to their clasped hands, limning their fingers in a light that cast no shadows. The stream's song crescendoed, wordless but unmistakable, and the horses shook their manes in unison, their bridle bells ringing a perfect fourth apart, harmonic overtones shimmering through the charged air. And high above, where the arrow had vanished, the clouds parted further still, revealing not sky, but something vaster, an endless, starless dark that somehow pulsed with the same rhythm as their now synchronized heartbeats. Dust motes formerly dancing now froze mid-swirl, each suspended particle revealing itself to be a miniature lotus, its petals carved from sunlight and wind. Krishna's thumb, still pressed to Arjuna's wrist, began tracing something that wasn't letters, wasn't symbols, but a sensation that bypassed skin entirely to etch itself directly into bone memory. The kingfisher's stray feather glowed suddenly cerulean at its tip, a hue never seen in nature, as the stream's babble resolved into a woman's laughter, rich and familiar, though neither could place it. And beneath them, impossibly, the chariot's wheels began sprouting tender green shoots, winding upward in spiral patterns that mirrored the whorls on their fingertips. The frozen dust lotuses pulsed once, luminescence rippling outward in concentric waves. And somewhere behind them, a soldier gasped as his spear took root, iron tip blooming into jasmine blossoms that perfumed the air with their impossible sweetness. Krishna exhaled a breath that carried the scent of monsoon-soaked earth, and the light between their hands intensified further, not blinding but revealing, as if they stood at the precise focal point where all dawns converged. The horses, previously still, shifted weight in perfect unison, their hooves now wreathed in tiny vines that flowered violet and gold with each step they didn't take. And the sound, when it came, wasn't sound at all, but the palpable vibration of 1,000 spiderwebs trembling in unison, tuned to a frequency that resonated in their marrow. Arjuna's pupils dilated not from darkness, but from the sudden influx of a light too nuanced to name, as the petal dust motes reconstituted themselves into something resembling wings, fluttering against his cheekbone with the weightlessness of a butterfly's first flight. Krishna's free hand lifted, not in blessing, but in mimicry of some deeper reflex, and the stream's laughter shifted pitch, harmonizing with the now audible hum of the growing vines. The soldiers' dropped weapons began sprouting too, not just flowers now, but fruits, pomegranates splitting to reveal seeds that gleamed like polished rubies, mangoes perfuming the air with their impossible ripeness. And beneath it, all barely perceptible, the earth itself seemed to breathe in time with them, its exhalation sending ripples through the grass that had nothing to do with wind. The kingfisher's feather in Arjuna's hair unfurled, not into plumage, but into something more akin to script, its barbs rearranging into glyphs that shimmered between recognition and mystery before dissolving into golden vapor. Krishna's thumb paused mid-trace, not in hesitation, but in response to some silent cue, as the chariot's newly grown vines began bearing their own impossible yield. Tiny silver bells that rang in perfect thirds without being struck. The horses' flower-wreathed hooves left no prints now, only concentric rings of clover that glowed faintly at their edges, while overhead, the arrow's long-vanished path etched itself momentarily against the sky, not as a scar, but as a seam revealing glimpses of some luminous beyond. Single drop of dew rolled down Krishna's forearm, not falling, but navigating its path, tracing constellations unknown to any astronomer before pooling in the hollow of Arjuna's upturned palm with a sound like distant rain. The pomegranate seeds pulsed where they'd fallen, each one birthing miniature saplings that grew to maturity in seconds before dissolving back into the earth, while the mangoes' perfume thickened into something almost tactile, wrapping around them both like an embrace from an unseen elder. The soldiers' faces, previously tense, had slackened into expressions of bewildered awe, their eyes reflecting not the unfolding miracles, but the dawning realization that they'd been dreaming the same dream simultaneously. The vine's silver bells stilled abruptly, their final note lingering as a tangible presence between Arjuna's ribs, as the script feather's golden vapor coalesced into a single word that hovered, untranslated but understood, just above their still-joined hands. Krishna's eyelashes caught the light strangely, casting prismatic shadows that danced across Arjuna's collarbones, while the horses' flowered hooves lifted slightly, not to step forward, but to hover centimeters above the clover-circled earth. And in that suspended moment, as the dew in Arjuna's palm evaporated into something more akin to starlight, the last remaining dust lotus unfolded fully at last, revealing not pollen, but a miniature cosmos spinning silently at its heart.